A prenup, sometimes known as an antenuptial agreement, is an agreement between two parties that are anticipating entering into a marriage. It's one in which the parties recognize that in the event that the marriage ends, either by divorce or annulment or even death, the parties have already decided how they will divide their assets. What assets will be considered marital, what assets will not be considered marital, and how they will divide up marital assets. You can even address the question or issue of alimony in a prenuptial agreement. The benefit this has is it takes the discretion out of the court and puts it into the parties' hands so that they can control how their divorce will go well before that ever happens. As I said, prenuptial agreements also, they deal with when a marriage ends, and a marriage can end not only through a divorce, but also through death. So if you're considering a prenuptial agreement, it's also important to go ahead and make a will. So that way you can determine what's happening to your marital assets in the event of your death. A postnup, also known as a postnuptial agreement, very similar to a prenup, it's just about timing. It's where the parties have reached an agreement regarding the division of assets at the time of the dissolution of the marriage, either through divorce or death, after they've already gotten married. It's a little bit different because of the consideration for that agreement is not the marriage itself, as is the case in a prenup. It's also not in contemplation of a divorce. It's often used as a method to keep the parties together and avoid a divorce. And so it's just an agreement as to the division of assets or determination of property rights or marital rights, if we're talking about alimony, after the parties have actually gotten married. Divorce is one of the most stressful times in someone's life. And if you can avoid that stress on the front end by determining how the parties will divide their assets in the event of a divorce, then it can save the parties a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of headache. So you've just gotten engaged, and maybe you have some assets that you want to make sure are protected when you get married. The best way to approach that conversation, I would say, is to have an open and honest conversation about what your expectations and what your partner's expectations are going into this marriage. How will bills be paid? How will finances be handled? And in that conversation, what would happen in the event of a divorce is a great thing to address. And a prenuptial agreement is the best way to address that. I wouldn't say that a prenuptial agreement sets one up for failure or success, but I would say in a conversation about both parties' expectations in a marriage does set you up for success. And sometimes that conversation will address whether or not the parties need a prenuptial agreement. I would say it's never a bad idea to have one. And there are certain situations where you definitely want one. Situations where maybe there are certain inheritables that one party expects to receive. Or maybe there's adult children. Maybe this is a second marriage and you want to make sure that your children are cared for from your estate. Maybe there is large imbalance of assets coming into the marriage that you want protected. These are all questions that are important because what you have in mind coming into this marriage and what they have in mind coming into the marriage are not always the same. So getting on the same page early is important. If you have questions about prenuptial or postnuptial agreements, please contact us at Leigh, Associates.